Hi everyone. I've gone ahead and I've done something. I've recommented number 8 and uncommented number 9. So what we see now is basically I want to go back and look. You see, we had this gap over here, and at that time, uh, we got flex grow and 25%, and we got 3 items per row. And it was the same thing going on with CSS Grid because we got those gaps that didn't allow for many more items, even though they were set on 25%. So that's the history. Now we go a bit further, and we're going to look at a couple of more things. And there looks like there are a lot more text here, but it's kind of easy to understand. We start off by what is this? In CSS, it's called a custom property, but you will hear me say variable, and you can say variable, custom property, whatever you want. Everyone would understand you, and there's nothing wrong with it. But a variable is actually you can use a variable like, for example, saying I have a variable called name, and I set that equal to a specific name. It could be your name, and whenever I then afterwards I call the variable called name, I get your name. I store other values inside of that variable. But before we get to show how that works in practice, which will probably make it a lot clearer to you than just me theoretically describing it to you, I want to explain to you how the syntax works for how to declare a variable in CSS. So I'm first using double dashes. That's mandatory. And then I'm setting out the variable name. I could just, for example, now type name. It could be anything, but right now I'm typing name. And I'm going colon and like this. So it could be anything. You shouldn't start to use numbers and stuff like that, but it could be a lot of things going on here. So, and you can use numbers, but there are like practices that we are trying to sometimes, step away from using numbers and variables and stuff. So we have name here, and then we have, for example, your name. I don't know your name, so I'm going to say my name, Alexander Karlsson. Now, whenever I do this later on, like for example, let's say I have there's a property called content where I can actually type text, and I can do this, the text, and then I'm calling something like I could call var. I'm going to do this easier, call var, and then I'm going with name. So this is actually me calling this value up here. What happens is that it goes to this one and it looks inside and gets the value, takes that value, and it replaces this whole line with this. You don't have to have the constant property. It could be any property. You can do this in, as long as you use the variable thing. So if we look at this code, we can get this directly here, but you'll see there's something different. I've included this one. And that has something to do with not with syntax. It has to do with what I want to signal to other developers. Whenever I write a property that is local, I do this. Whenever I write a property that is global, I do this. And local and global, it kind of means if I write something that I want to be available for all elements, I cannot write that custom property inside of a class called Flexbox. Now, inside of Flexbox, I will not be able to use that property inside of CSS Grid. So it's not globally available. You see, if I write this property inside of the class Flexbox, everything inside of this one is still unable to, reach this property. That's a strength I want to use sometimes, but it's also something I don't want to use sometimes. It depends on the practice. Do I want it to be available for all elements, or do I not? So that's the addition of this one. It depends on if I want it to be globally or locally available. Now this one means it's scoped to the Flexbox. I'm taking this whole thing here, and you see that the value inside is 1 rem. So what I actually get, I get down here when it says var gap size. This is what's set, which is the same as we did up here. We're actually doing the same thing. The difference here is still the single point of definition. If I were to use this value a multiple of times, like 10 or so, then only thing I need to do to change the value on all those places where I used it is to change the value here. You see the power in that? If some customer of mine come to me and ask me, can you change the distance in the gap size? It seems a bit big. I can change it on everything where I've set exactly that gap size. So I can work more efficiently. Now, we got columns, that's 4. And we get gaps. So what's going on here then? Let's look at it. So it says that for this Flexbox, we're setting up 4 columns, which is true. We got 4 columns over here. So we want to, for some reason, we want to store the value columns as 4. And we want to store the gap size as 1 rem. I'm going to close these ones down. I don't know why they're popping up. And then we do something strange. We're making a calculation inside of this one called gaps. So what gap is actually, it's kind of a dynamic way to calculate how many gaps there will be. If we have 4 columns, there is always going to be 3 gaps in the width direction. You see, we have one between the first 2, and then one there in the middle, and then one between the last 2. So that's 3 gaps. If we had 5, we would have 4 gaps. If we had 6, we would have 5 gaps. You see, that is why this calculation works. It takes the amount of columns I've set, and then it reduces that by 1. So I know that I have a gaps of 3 here, but what I have here depends on what I wrote up here. If I write 5, this is going to be 4. If I write 6, this is going to be 5, which means I don't have to remember to change both. I can just change one, and it's in it, and this one changes as well. You see, that is part of what you will need to think about when you're making your own code in the future. You can make things depend on just a simple value. So now we got the amount of gaps. Now we can see that we got a lot of things going on here. We get the equal size. We get 4 in a row, 4 per row, and we still get the gaps. In contrary to what we got earlier when we had 25% and so on. At that point in time, well, we couldn't. We didn't get that. We got 1, 2, 3 per row all the time, even though we said 25%. So what has changed? Well, to see that, you have to go down here and look. We're using gap size, like I said before, 1 rem. And then we're saying flex grow 1, which is allowing things to grow if there is available space. And then we are changing the flex spaces to something extremely complicated when you look at it first, but it's not. It is something completely easy to break down. So let me break it down for you. If I write everything in a line like this, things start to look strange. When I use a lot of letters inside something that is mathematics, things start to look strange. If I instead do this, say 100%, okay? We start by doing that. And then we're saying minus whatever the gap size was, which is 1 rem, times the amount of gaps. How many? So we got the size. Now we want to know how many gaps there were. So gaps, in this case, we know there are 3. We got 1 rem times 3. It's fairly simple, right? And when we have all of that, we want to, and you know how parentheses work, we want to divide all of that on how many columns we have set up. And the amount of columns in this case is 4. So I want to calculate this. I will say that 1 rem, now it's easy to calculate. We get 3 rem, right? And 100%, that is a dynamic value, so we cannot know. But we can say, like, if let's say the screen is a 1000 pixels in width at that very moment when we are making this calculation. 100% means, or we can say the container is 1000 pixels, so we make it easy to count. Well, 1000 pixels, and we got minus 1 3 rem. Let's say that 1 rem is 10 pixels. So I will make this 30 pixels, right? So we got 1000 minus 30 pixels divided by 4. So what we actually got here is 970 pixels divided by 4. And this is very simple mathematics. And now suddenly, by doing all of that, FlexBasis knows how big the item is allowed to be. You see? And still remain 4 in that column. So we cannot say it should be 25% anymore. It is not allowed, because 25% plus the gaps would not be 100%, would be more than 100% together. But if we first remove the gap, so remove that from those 100% and then divide it, the remainder that is left there, we can be certain that they are fitting. And they actually do, as you can see. So please stop the video if you want to and just look at this again. Try to understand. This is really important for the future you have inside work with just Flexbox and CSS Grid. Those who have paused now, let's go ahead and look at what's going on in CSS Grid, because for some reason we've managed to do the same thing here, but with a lot less code. And that's because of the power of this one, fractions, and how they're actually working as a unit. So go to CSS Grid, you will see gap size is 1 rem, and you see it's locally set here, and we have columns 4. And then we go display grid, so we enable that part, of course, and we have gap size, which is the same as we did over there. We are calling this variable, and it gets replaced with 1 rem. And then we get grid template columns, which we encountered last time over here, where we're actually creating our template. And then the first value in repeat, which was previously autofill, now it's 4, because we replaced this with 4. And then we say each one of them should take equal size. So, or they should be in comparison to one another. It should be 1-to-1 ratio. They should never be larger than any other item. So they take up take up that space. We have divided the thing into 4 and let them take up the available space. That is how simple it is. We don't have to calculate this anymore. We don't have to do this after doing Flexbox. And now CSS Grid is starting to shine, right? We don't have to make those difficult calculations, because when we use fractional units, it is going to do this, automatically. We just say how many columns, and then it does the rest automatically. In fact, in a situation such as this, it is even unnecessary to use columns, because I will not use it more than once. So why not only just write it like this? I'm not going to use it more. I don't have any children that I will use it for and anything like that, and no inheritance, because it's just this code. So even this would work great. And this one, why do I need this? No. I can make this happen. and make it custom and make it easy to handle, and still use no custom properties. And of course, you could do that up here as well. But as you can see, I actually use these and I calculate things and I use columns 2 times and I use gap size 1, 2 times. And you see, I use the calculation of columns 1. So you see, yeah, here there's actually a purpose. I reuse them a couple of times and therefore I need them. I could use them in the children. I use them on the parent. But down here, there's no purpose. I'll get back to keeping them there. They'll stick around. And I'll see you in the next video.